So it may look like it's a gorgeous day out here, but it's a little bit chilly, so bear with me here. We're going to go around today and give you a detailed review of this normally aspirated 210L. This plane is for sale, so we're going to talk a little bit about the specifics of this plane, but it is going to be a very general overview as well so that you can get a good feel for this type of aircraft. So one of the things I want to say is that this plane has been a wonderful plane. We've actually taken it on 2,000-mile cross country up and over the Rockies at about 15,000 feet, and it flew beautifully. And we've also had low altitude and night flights, so it'll handle just about anything, and it's super comfortable to ride in. We're going to go ahead and we're going to walk around the outside. I'm going to show you around in the interior. I'm also going to give you a detailed breakdown and overview of the panel and all the avionics that I have in it. We're going to go over the engine, give you some detailed specs about it, and then I'm going to take you up for a flight. We're going to see takeoff, the climb, cruise performance. We're going to show you some engine management, walk it through lean of peak, and we're going to do a landing. Although the first time we did have to go around due to a plane that went into the runway without a radio call, so we'll show you that too. Down below, we do have a link to an article on our website that is a very detailed article about the 210L if you'd like to get a little bit more information than what you find in the video here. And if you've got any questions, please feel free to send them off to us and we'll definitely answer them for you. Also, we definitely encourage you to subscribe to our channel so that you can see more videos like this in the future. And of course, as always, thank you for watching. The Cessna 210 is called the King of Singles and probably one of the best sixth-place singles ever built. So I want to go through this 210L model, which is a normally aspirated and a little bit harder to find but less expensive to maintain than the Turbo 210 or the pressurized 210. I'm going to talk a little bit about some important stuff on this plane that aren't really discussed in other videos. I also want to go through stuff like the payload, range, climb, cruise speed, the reliability, comfort. So let's start out. The useful load on this airplane is almost 1,600 pounds. That is an incredibly high useful load for a single. And now useful load is important, but also watch the CG limits on a plane. The Cessna 210 has an extremely flexible CG, which allows you to load the airplane in almost any configuration without going outside the envelope. It is a true sixth place in that you can have 6 adults in there and include some baggage. If you only need 3 or 4 adults, you can lay that back seat down and you can put a bunch of stuff in the back without having to worry about off-centering your CG there. Let's talk a little bit about the exterior of this one. It has been professionally repainted. You can see just how shiny it is. It's in great condition. There's no corrosion or hail. It's clean overall. You can see that a paint job like this would normally cost about $15,000 to $20,000, and it was done nice and professional. The glasses on there are all in clean condition. There's no fogging on any of them. Easy to see out of. So let's talk about the wing design on this. This Cessna 210L has a cantilever wing design, which has a higher G-load than the strut-style wings. The main thing is that they're not made anymore due to the higher production costs, but they are a very good design on the wing. The Cessna 210L also has long-range 90-gallon tanks, so that means that you can fly for a number of hours before having to stop for fuel, which is really nice. One of the things you want to be careful of when you're filling the tanks on these is after you fill it, wait about 2 minutes before you do the fuel dip on it. This is because there are separate compartments inside of the wings, and you want to make sure you give the fuel enough time to settle in between all the compartments before you dip it. Make sure you're getting an accurate number on your dipstick. So one final thing on here, we've got the Macaulay 3-blade prop. This 3-blade design is actually an increase of aerodynamics and will increase your cruise speed by up to 8 knots, so that's a really nice feature to have as well. Okay, I'm going to show you a few different components of this gear system here, talk a little bit about it. First thing I want to do is I want to show you in the front. So obviously the front gear, you can see that it opens up here so that this gear will actually slide up and forward into the front cowling here, and then that door closes. one of the features of this gear system is this little switch. So one of your pre-flight things should really be to check this little switch, and what this does is that when you take off, your shock obviously will extend down, so then this will push in here and push this pin up. And what that does is it tells the system that, okay, you're off the ground, we can go ahead and we can retract the gear whenever you're ready. If you were to try to flip the gear position to stow the gear while you're on the ground, this switch being open like this is going to prevent that from happening. Had a story I heard once about a different type of aircraft that didn't have something like this. Somebody reached over, they wanted to lift up the flaps, accidentally grabbed the gear switch and lifted up the gear instead. That was not very good for the belly of the aircraft, so this is a really nice feature to have for that. Alright, I want to talk about this landing gear a little bit more. So in 1970, they actually changed this design to the tubular design. The reason for that was they were able to adjust where it pivoted and how it pivoted in so that it came back and under the fuselage further and inside further. The benefit of that is that with that third row seat, they were able to make it a full-size third row seat where even adults could fit and sit there comfortably, because if you notice, this little hump is actually right above where the landing gear stows, but it does not affect the third row seat, so that gives you quite a bit of space in the cargo area still, while allowing that third row seat to be a full-size third row and fit just about anybody inside. Alright, the next thing I want to do is I want to go inside here. We're going to show you the inside of this gorgeous plane, give you a little bit of the specs of what we can find in here. Alright, so now we're going to go ahead and take a look at the interior of this 210L. So the first thing you're going to notice, it's got the leather seats, and the full reupholstery has been redone on this, and not only the upholstery, but also all of the panel work. So if you look, you can see that the roof part has been redone up here. It's got the leather. It does have the zips through here for different access points that you need. You've got vents up here for the front. You've got some light covers up here as well. If we look a little bit further back here, there's additional vents for the second row, as well as another light. And then we've also got this back set of vents there that can be used either for the second row or for the third row, depending on if you've got people sitting back there. All of these panels you can see all the way through have been redone, kind of a two-tone material, and that paneling also follows through on both of the doors, as well as up here in the front. So you can see the work that's been done to this. This is a little over $10,000 job easily, and you can see how fine it was done and how well it was done. It does have a 6-place intercom system, so you've got for all 6, as well as the push to talk on both of the yokes, so that either person up front can make radio calls. Okay, so going back to these seats for a few seconds here, the seats are in really nice configuration. You've got multiple levers here, so you've got this one here that actually you can see is adjusting the height up and down, so depending on how tall a person is or how much leg room they need, you've got that adjustment. This one helps tilt the seat back, so somebody needs to take a quick snooze in flight, you can lay it back quite a bit and recline it, take a little bit of a nap. And then obviously you're forward and backwards so that you can adjust your leg room and being able to reach the pedals as well. Also on the front seats we do have the 3-point harness. So you've got your shoulder harness up here for these 2 front seats as well. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to slide this seat forward so I can show you the back seats a little bit. Okay, so for these middle seats, you've got, again, an adjustment lever here so that you can lean these 2 middle seats forward or backward to give a little bit more space for relaxing. And then if you just lift up on here, you can slide this one forward so that you've got enough leg room here, but gives you additional leg room in the back bench. Along with the interior redo, they did do the new overlay here on the panel. Everything has been cut out, so all the gauges and everything like that are made to fit. Okay, so I wanted to talk a little bit more about the panel here. You can see all of the factory gauges. Everything is clean, easy to read. You've got most of your indicators right up there that you need for when you're in flight. You've got a Garmin GL106 here, and that is connected to your GPS, your Garmin GPS, so that you can run your CDI. This Garmin here is actually the GNS 430W, so it is a WAS GPS, and that does have the navigator and terrain, so you can run all of your IFR RNAV approaches. Speaking of IFR, the plane is IFR certified, and that is good for 2 years. That was just done. The Garmin GPS is coupled with the MFD, so the MX20 will show your direction of travel and display when you have go out here so you can see which direction you're going. It's also got terrain on there as well. Once you plug in a location here that you're going to be flying to, it's going to show you your from your transponder. It'll show you if there's traffic in the area, so you can use this as an additional traffic source. Another thing to look at here is the Garmin GTX 330. This is an ES upgrade on this Garmin, so you do have your ADS-B out 2020 mandate complied with when you've got this coupled to this. So we are compliant for the ADS-B out. Saves over $5,000 on upgrading for ADS-B for that. Another thing that's connected to these Garmins are is the JPI, so it does have a fuel flow in here, and I'm going to talk about the JPI a little bit more, but the one key point is right here. You've got fuel required, so once you were to take off and be in flight, it's going to calculate from your gallons per hour how much fuel is required for the trip that's in here. So that'll be really useful to have so that you can help with your fuel management and make sure that you've got enough fuel for the selected trip and the selected leg of your trip. And turn this here so you can see we do have a storm scope, and this is working. We have tested it in flight, and we do know that it does work with known storms in the area, so that is a very nice thing to have. You can monitor up to 200 nautical miles away to see which direction storms are heading and keep yourself out of those tricky situations. So going back to this JPI now, I want to talk about this in a little bit more detail. There's quite a few things going on in here, and I'm going to go through one at a time. One thing you want to know is that this side is customizable. You can put these in any order that you want so that you can easily see a bunch of different things. One is your oil temperature. It's going to give you a very accurate reading on your oil temp. Another point here is the oil pressure. So you can make sure that once you're up and running that you're getting adequate oil pressure. That's going to help you in case if for whatever reason you're low on oil or anything like that, your oil pressure is going to show on there and you can monitor your engine that way. Again, we were talking about the gallons per hour. So the benefit of the gallons per hour is that when you're taking off, you can see what your gallons per hour is on takeoff. But then once you start your cruise, you can adjust your gallons per hour with your mixture and get to a good level for when you're flying. And then that's going to help you because it knows how much fuel you have remaining in your tanks and also how much fuel you've used out of your tanks. So if you input a location in your GPS, then that's going to send a signal to here, and it's going to tell you based on your current gallons per hour and the distance you have on your left on your GPS track, approximately how many gallons you're required to use. So if you have 55.7 remaining and the leg that you're flying is going to require 52.6, that's a little bit borderline. You might want to consider having a fuel stop a little bit sooner, or possibly you're not running as lean as you thought you were. You've got your outside air temperature, so you can see what the outside ambient air temperature is, which is also helpful to get your actual speed off of your indicator over there. And then this one over here, I would have to actually double check and see because that is, I believe, time to empty. So it calculates not only how much fuel you have left, 55 gallons, but based on what your current consumption is, how many hours or minutes you can still fly before you're going to run out of fuel in all your tanks. Going up to the top, we have our RPM and our RPM and our manifold pressure here. And then it also calculates your horsepower based off of those two. So that's kind of nice. You don't have to sit and manually calculate horsepower. It automatically tells you. Then you go along the bottom here and you can see all 6 of the cylinders. So it's going to tell you 2 lines on the graph, the one line on the left side and one line on the right side. The one on the left is your exhaust gas temperatures and the one on the right is your cylinder head temperatures. So you can see that the max line, the red line on cylinder head temps is 450. We like to run them about 380 or less. So it's really convenient to see that. You can see all across the board, whereas in the factory, you've got your EGT over here, that's off of 1, and you're just going off of an average, and you just have to make your best guess. But over here, you're getting both your EGT and your CHT for every single cylinder. Now, the benefit of this plane is that we do have balanced GAMI fuel injectors installed, which have been calibrated by GAMIs. One last thing on here, you can see it's kind of flashing down along the bottom. It's got different options. So along the bottom here, it's going to cycle through each of the different settings and show you each of those different ones. And the benefit of that is that if there was something, for example, you were going over voltage, your alternator was acting up, or your oil pressure was dropping down into an unsafe level, it's going to actually flash red at you along the bottom here so that it's going to alert you right away. It's right in front of the main pilot seat. It's going to draw your attention and say, hey, something's going on with the engine. You got to take an eye out, keep an ear out, make sure nothing's making noises, maybe land a little bit sooner. Check this out and see what's going on. So it really helps reduce the workload of the pilot that way. One final thing on this one is that it does have a plug right here. So you can actually plug in a USB port, download all the data because it does record automatically the entire flight. So if there's anything that comes out and jumps out as out of parameter and you have a question or a concern on it, you download your data. You can have a mechanic that is familiar with these systems review the data, and it will pull up a bunch of information that you can't quite see this in here, and it's going to be able to let your mechanic really pinpoint and diagnose what might be going on and help you adjust or do repairs to the engine as necessary. So that download port there is extremely helpful as well. I'm just going to round out the panel a little bit, as I'm sure you know what all these other ones are, but you've got your manifold pressure here, you've got your RPM gauge, and you've got your fuel flow in pounds per hour. Now, they ran out of space on the other side, so these are where they're put on the panel, but what we decided is we were going to mount this JPI over on this side, so that way when you're doing your scanning of your 6-pack layout and wanting to see everything, you don't have to scan all the way over here on the other side of the stack. You've got the same information right here in your JPI so that you can easily read your RPM and your fuel flow and your manifold pressure and everything without having to scan over to this side. You do have your fuel level indicators up here, your amp gauge, oil temp, oil pressure, all of those are still working condition. Your EGT also works, your factory EGT. We find it's easy to pre-lean on this one a little bit first, and then once you get pre-leaned on here, then you can go over to the JPI and continue your lean process, especially if you want to run a lean of peak. You've got your suction gauge, and then you've got your attack and everything down here as well. A little cubby. Put all of your paperwork in there. And our flaps on these, I do like these flaps because it is very intuitive. You've got to stop right there at 10 degrees and you have to bring it over and down for 20 degrees and then over and down again for your full flaps. And then when you're coming up, you can feel it when you get to the 20 degrees and feel it again when you go to the 10 degrees. So when you're in flight, this is very helpful because it's going to reduce your workload. You don't have to scan over to this. You just feel it and you can just set it when you get used to it. So that way you don't have to take your eyes off of what you're doing to feel what you're doing over here on the flaps. Obviously throttle, your prop, your mixture, all right here, easy to access. You've got your elevator manual trim, and then you've got your rudder trim. Just to pop back up here really quick onto the yoke, since I'm talking about trim, we've got our electric trim switch there, so that's easy to use, as well as your push to talk over here since we're on the yoke. What else? So we've got down here our left and right tank selector, really easy to access for both pilot seats. You can just reach down and flip it from one side to the other. That makes it very easy. Your cowl flaps are notched, so you can feel just how far up you're going on your cowl flap settings. Makes it really easy to shut them down halfway or any distance that you want to. Okay, so on this side it's going to be a little hard to see, but we've got a little lever here so that this actually allows for you to stow the rudder pedals on the right hand side. So if you've got somebody with really long legs that you don't want messing around with the pedals, or if you've got a kid on this side, or whatever the reason is, you're actually able to push on here and stow the rudder pedals all the way up against the firewall, which is one pull and one click and they're back in place for somebody to fly from this seat. So that's extremely handy to have. Your gear selector is over here, if you can see that, for your gear up and down, so very easy to access, and the indicator lights are right next to it, so right in the pilot's vision when they're flying, as well as your manual gear extension down here. So you've got that lever, which we hope nobody ever has to use, but it's easily accessible from either seat in the front. Alright, so the next thing we're going to do is we're going to take a look at the engine here on this 210L. As you can see, it is a Continental 6-cylinder. It is a fuel-injected, normally aspirated IO 520L. It is a 300 horsepower. That is limited to about 5 minutes on takeoff, and then it will run 285 horsepower continuously. This particular engine is a zero-time or factory remand engine. A lot of times they have SMOH since major overhaul, but this is actually since factory remand. Compressions on this are all in the mid-70s. The TBO on these motors are 1700, which is a little bit higher than average. Usually they're about 1400 and 1500 hours on them. As they're normally aspirated, they are a lower maintenance cost. They do run cooler than the turbos. They have less cramped space around them, so that reduces labor time. And there's also less things to maintain and manage while you're flying. Here we've got the battery box. It is a 28-volt system. They upgraded that in 1972, which allows for the gear system to be electric over hydraulic versus the older engine-driven hydraulic pump system. You can see all of the space around inside of the engine compartment. Easy to work with, lots of space to get in there and do any parts changes that needed to be done. So you'll see all of these probes throughout here. Most of these are related to that JPI engine monitor system. Allows you to monitor things such as the exhaust gas temperatures, the cylinder head temperatures in there, and all those different probes. You've also got some red ones in here. This is for the Tanis engine heater. Each cylinder has a heater on it, as well as down on the oil pan. There is one down there as well. So that Tanis engine heater is very useful to have. It is the type that you can actually plug it in and just keep it plugged in all the time if you wanted to. Unlike other models, when it heats the oil pan as well as the cylinder heads, that will allow it to not create excess moisture in the system, so then you can leave it plugged in whenever you want to. You could also use a shut-off switch if you wanted to put in a timer and plug it in and have it turn on just before you're going to go flying or something like that if you wanted to. So the benefit of having this engine heater, you can see the plugs over here as well for each of the cylinders. It lets the oil temps warm up before you even start it, which is good so you're not having a cold start. But you also want the oil temp to be at least 90 before you do any kind of run up or anything like that. So you can see here that it does have Gavi fuel injectors in here. The balanced fuel injectors are a good added benefit to this motor. It'll also allow you to fly on lean of peak much more efficiently. Saves you quite a bit. So that lean of peak, there's a couple of things with that. Let's say that you have about a 3 gallon per hour fuel decrease by running lean of peak. If you go over 1,000 hours of time, when you consider average fuel costs, that's going to be about $15,000 in fuel savings. So over the life of an engine, if you think of that, your fuel savings alone could pay for the entire engine overhaul. These cylinders will run cooler when they're on lean of peak. We spoke to a Continental engineer, and anything below 65% power and power settings, you can run any mixture setting and it will not hurt this engine in any way. these Continentals, having the 6-cylinder motor in here is nice for longer trips especially. They run smoother. When you have less vibration, you have less fatigue. You can tell on those smaller planes when you've got smaller engines, the vibrations and the roughness of running that will increase your fatigue. So those longer trips, it's nice to have that smoother running engine. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and get started for the startup. We're going to get the mixture to rich. Cowl flaps are usually open, but it's a really cold day, so we're not going to worry about that for right now. We've got the fuel selector to the fuller bay, and then we're going to go ahead and flip the master on first, and then we want to put the low side fuel pump on, and then we're going to increase pushing the throttle until we get to about 60 pounds of fuel pressure, and then turn off the fuel pump and pull the throttle back out, and then we're going to go ahead and we just turn over the key and we'll get it started here. The gross weight of this Cessna 210 is 3,800 pounds. Useful load is 1,580 pounds. Fuel capacity is 90 gallons, which is 540 pounds, so even with full fuel, you will still have a 1,050 pound payload. Ground run at full gross is 1,100 feet. Maximum range at 10,000 feet is 8.1 hours and 1,250 miles. Ceiling at full gross is 15,500 feet, but if you're even 400 pounds lighter, your ceiling goes up to 18,000 feet. When we took this plane to California, we spent most of our time at 14,500 feet over the Rockies, and we had a landing and takeoff at a high altitude airport with a daytime density altitude of over 10,000 feet.
Get ready to take off. So this is where another time that this JPI really comes in handy. So you can see that the oil temp is nice and in the green, same as on the factory gauge. So get ready here and let's do the run up. We had leaned it out here for taxi, so I'll push that all the way in now. We're gonna turn up the throttle here, gonna get the RPMs to about 1,700 on this one. And switch the mags one at a time. So you can actually see on the factory gauge here as well as on the JPI, you've got the mag drop. You're also wanting to cycle the prop, and on there you're also checking in the oil pressure, make sure that it's dropping as you cycle it. Okay, then we'll pull the throttle back out and we'll get our radio call made. Alright, so we do have the cowl flaps mostly closed, or all the way closed at this particular point because it is pretty cold outside, but we'll be able to monitor the temperatures right there on the JPI, and that way we can tell if it's starting to get a little bit warm. We'll go ahead and open them up a little bit when we're taking off. We've got that flap setting. You can see that there at 10 degrees, so we're going to go ahead and leave it at that for the takeoff. It's only a little bit of 3 to 5 knot wind, so we'll go ahead and just do a 10-degree flaps on takeoff here. You can see here when we're on the ground, it actually gives you your runway layouts here on the MD, so that's nice to have. So one of the things when we're taking off is you want to increase the throttle slowly without just jamming it in there, and you're going to be using quite a bit of heavy rudder, usually right rudder, to kind of straighten yourself out, but you definitely want to make sure that you increase that throttle slowly until you get to a certain point so that you can maintain control of the aircraft. Once you get to a safe spot, you can go ahead and take the flaps out. The main thing with the gear is that you need to wait just a little bit longer than you would on a low-wing aircraft, because the gears wing out and then back for the two main gears, and that creates quite a bit of drag, so you need to make sure you've got a high enough airspeed before you do that. And now we're going to go ahead and we're going to climb out here. So I know it's a little bit hard to see, but you can tell that we are going at somewhere between 12 and 1300 feet per minute. Then we've got our airspeed at about 120. Now here is leaning out the mixture. So you can see here that your fuel flow, you've got your pounds per hour right there. But then on top of that, you've also got over here your gallons per hour. So again, we're still in a climb of about 1,000 per minute, so we are going to have a bit of a higher fuel flow. Looks like at about 16.5 right now. But even though we are climbing at almost 1,000 foot per minute, we have it at about 68% power, so we're not even sitting at 70% power right now. Alright, adjusting the configurations here a little bit, you can see that we're running just over 70% horsepower right now, and our ground speed is at 173 knots right now. Alright, so I want to go ahead and show you this lean of peak method, which is made very simple by having a JPI installed. So the first thing you do is you want to pre-lean just a little bit to make sure that you are rich of peak but not too far, so that you can hit the lean fine button here. And you want to have lean of peak selected, and then you go ahead and you just start turning the mixture down. So you can see right now we're at about 157 knots ground speed and using about 14 gallons per hour at about 58 to 60% horsepower. So we're going to go ahead and work on leaning it out. And you can see now it's flipped the bar graph inverted and it's selected the leanest and the richest cylinders. So that's the nice thing about the GAM injectors is that those peak at really close to the same time. And now we're going to go ahead and lean it out. That lean of peak delta on the left side shows that we're about 15 degrees lean of peak, so you can go about 25, even 30 if you want to. And then you can see that your gallons per hour are right down there, almost at about 11. And still your ground speed is running about 150. So that shows that you didn't lose too much on your ground speed. One of the nice things about this plane is how steady it is. It is very predictable when you have power settings in just the right spot. Once you get a feel for it, it's really easy to fly it and know what you need to be doing, especially on a final like this. So we're just under 5 mile final, straight in for the runway. And we're going to go ahead and we're just going to start descending down and getting into the pattern and getting the configuration set up. We got to go ahead and throw the prop in and do the mixture to full rich. We've already got a set of 10 degrees there on the flaps. The mixture is full in. The prop is partway in there. We'll drop down to about 20-degree flaps. Still on the left tank, as that is the fuller tank still. And it's very predictable aircraft. We're running at about a 3 mile final. As long as you know what the settings are going to be, it's really easy to maintain control of the plane on. One of the other things is when you are doing your landing setup and getting ready to go is to understand how much wind there is and which direction it's coming from as far as how far your flaps want to be down. But the main thing is on a 210 like this, you want to carry in a little bit of power if you can. I'm going to pause there and show you the flaps going, or the gear going down. And nice thing is you can look out the window there and you can see that your gear is down on your two main gears. But the main thing is that I was saying you do want to carry a little bit of power into it, especially if it's a longer runway. It's a good idea to do that because you want to make sure that you are in control of the plane, and having that little bit of power makes it really easy for that. Alright, so we're going to go ahead and spin around and take a go around because there was an aircraft out on the runway there. Didn't quite make the radio call before they went into the runway, so just better safe than sorry. It does look like it might have been one of the local trainers, so we'll get set up for a final here again and try one more time. We're going to watch here and see, show that he's carrying a little bit of power here yet as we go in, making sure that the nose wheel is trimmed up enough to compensate for the little bit nose heavy attitude since we don't have any passengers in the rear. And the main thing is just to carry that power right till the end and let it just settle down on the runway by itself. That makes the smoothest landing. If you pull the power all the way out, it's hard to control it because there's quite a bit of weight behind this beast.